to record the lecture so that I can upload it so that everyone can access it easily. As you remembered, last time we stopped with trying to figure out how we can extract the important information from a paper, or in this case from an introduction, to figure out what should be in the abstract. And we briefly finished with that today. And then we talk a bit how to give presentations. So what should you take into account to give a presentation? What makes it probably better? And we first talk generally about presentations. And then in the end, we talk a bit about what will be different now that your presentations will be online. So now that we will use Zoom to have group presentations. So that's the general idea for today. I'm going to start sharing my slides. So I hope that's visible for everyone. So we did start with this introduction last time, and you went into those breakout rooms. We looked a bit through that, and in the end, what we identified are those points that are actually important. There's a word system in there. Everything else was too detailed information, something that we do not really need for our abstract, where we want to be brief and to the point. We want to tell the reader what the paper is about, what's the general problem, and what are we doing. So here in this case, the research makes 3 contributions, so we should talk about those. And we should also mention that the approach is evaluated. That is, there are experiments that have been run, and so that's the part that we should write. Did you try to use that to actually write an abstract? Did some of you try? If you don't want to speak up, there's this wonderful function down there where you can just raise your hand. So just give me a note if any one of you tried it. Okay, looks like you all are still very quiet. Let's recap what we figured out for that one. So the general frame for the problem that this paper considered was that, okay, airlines want to maximize the profit. And the information was that if we have a flight schedule, that will fix a large part of the cost, and it will fix the route that the airline can offer. And so what they wanted to study are competitive choices of flight schedules and route prices by an airline and hub and spoke system. So how will the flight schedules and how will the route prices influence the profit of the airline? And it's a hub and spoke system, so there's one or several hubs, and all the other airports are spokes. For the SL students, there are the 2 main systems. One is a point-to-point, which is what Ryanair usually operates. So you don't have connecting flights. You board at one place, you take the flight, and then you embark, and there will be no connecting flight. So that's just point-to-point. While in a hub-and-spoke system, you have one hub where lots of incoming flights come, and then you have the chance to switch flight there, so to make a connection and reach many destinations. You can, of course, also just arrive or depart from the hub. So that allows you, with the same number of flights, to have way more origin destination combinations. So that's the network system that they are going to look at here. And then they have those 3 contributions. And they have the expression calculating demand for each route. Then they have a mathematical programming heuristic that finds a flight schedule and route prices such that the profit of the airline is maximized. And then they use the heuristic to study competition in a hub and spoke system by allowing each airline to optimize its schedule. So that is, then in the search step here, they are no longer looking at a single airline, but at several airlines, and see what happens if they all optimize. At what point in time will we have an equilibrium? And then, as I said, on the right-hand side, we talk about that this approach is evaluated. They use a test problem and see how it performs. So if we think that those are the important things, then that's also what we're going to use to write our abstract. So this is just the same text blocks without the rest of the introduction, so that it gets a bit easier. And then you can see what the authors of the paper, and I'm going to upload this paper to DSUM and also to the homepage so that you can read the complete one if you want to. So this says, this paper studies the competitive choice of flight schedules and route prices by airlines operating in hub and spoke systems. So that says, first sentence, this is what our paper is about. Then there comes the sentence that tells us, well, okay, we have to choose flight schedules, we have to choose route prices. How do we want to do that? So what's the objective in trying to do that? So the second sentence says, airlines choose flight schedules and route prices to maximize profit, considering competitors' decisions. Okay, so now we know what problem they want to look at, and they also tell us what the objective is going to be. And then they tell us, okay, there are 3 contributions. This research makes 3 contributions. First, an expression is derived calculating demand for each route as a function of the service quality and prices of all routes. Second, a mathematical programming heuristic is developed to find the schedule and prices that maximize an airline's profit against fixed schedules and prices for other airlines. Third, the heuristic is used to study competition by allowing each airline to optimize its schedule and prices against the other's choices and by searching for an equilibrium. And then comes the part where, from the very last paragraph of the introduction, where we talk about the evaluation. The performance of the algorithm is evaluated against alternate heuristics, and a 5-city sample problem is presented. So here they say, hey, we didn't only look at what our algorithm gives us, but we looked at some other possibilities to solving this thing. And we looked at a relatively small sample problem with 5 cities, but something that can show how the algorithms behave. And then finally, 2 competitive examples are presented and analyzed. So in this introduction, we know what the problem is, why it's important, because they have an impact on maximizing the profit, and they tell us exactly what are the contributions they have. They have these 3 major contributions, and then they evaluate what they suggested. So then after that abstract, you can figure out, hey, is that a problem I'm actually interested in? Is that a solution I'm interested in, solution technique? And if it is, you can keep on reading. And if you say, yeah, that wasn't actually what I was trying to find, so that's not the paper I want to read. So that's what your abstract should enable your reader to do. You give a brief recap of what is the problem, possibly why it's important, what are the contributions, possibly how I evaluate it. And with that, your reader should have kind of the key take-home message. This is what we have been doing. This is why you should read the paper. So that's your next task when we did work our way through the reports. So that would be it from my side for talking about writing abstracts. Are there questions from any of you that we should discuss? So do you feel quite happy with, yeah, if you now have to write an abstract, you know what you have to do, or are there any open question, anything that is still unclear? Okay, then I'll talk about giving presentations. So as I said in the beginning, there are certain things where you'll have to have in mind that they are maybe more fitting if you actually stand in front of people, but most parts are valid equally if you stand in person before people or if you give your presentation online. So, and they are in part based on this academic presentation tip. So if you want to take a look, you can take a look there as well. So if you want to talk about how to give presentations, you can think about, well, it's not that different from actually writing a report. So what makes good writing? And there are 2 inputs there. You need to communicate an idea clearly and effectively. So you need to be really precise so that your reader can understand it. And the other thing is you should write elegant and stylish. And of course, the second part takes lots of practice and well, it will take time. The first thing needs two things. You need to have something to say, and you need to think clearly. So to know how you can express it, what is a logical order in which you want to present it. Well, as I said, the second point will take time and revision and possibly a good editor. So that is not something you can easily learn. And the first thing is still valid if you want to give a good presentation. You need to have something to say. So it's really difficult to give a presentation if you don't have any proper content. Talking about nothing will be difficult. And you need to think clearly. So you need to have kind of a script for what you want to say. So what are the things that I need to tell my reader first, or in this case, my listener first, so that they can understand what I will tell them later. What are things that I can maybe simplify just for the sake of the presentation and can tell them, hey, in my report, it's going to be a bit more complicated, but to be able to talk to you about it, I will make a simplification. So those are the things that you need to figure out beforehand. So there's nothing that necessarily takes time. You just need to think a bit about what is the message I want to get across and what are how do I help my listener to get them across. So what you should start with is structuring your work. And what is the first thing you should then think about is your audience. So that's, again, like in writing. If you write for your peers, you write differently, like if you write for a layman or if you write just for the experts in the field. You can expect them to know different things already beforehand, and you know that you'll have to explain certain things that you will not have to explain to another audience. So you always have to figure out, what is my audience? What can I expect them to know? What can I not expect them to know? And there's this idea that's called schemas. So the idea is, if you already know something and someone attaches information to that, what you know, then it's easy to learn it because you can just, oh yeah, this is something I know and now I expand that a bit. If, however, what you know is over here and someone talks about that and you don't really know how it connects what you already know, then it's harder to learn it. It's not natural to understand that. So you should think about, okay, what ideas does my audience know? In your case here, it's relatively easy because you're talking to your peers, so you can expect them, well, the thing that I knew before starting to learn about this topic, those are the things that my colleagues know. And I should try to build upon that and explain things that I needed to explain to myself. So have these existing schemas, the things that you already know, and then try to attach the new information to that. And if you cannot fit it in an existing scheme, then it will be harder to understand. So say, hey, this is something you already know. Remember, we're talking about this, and now I'm giving you more information on that. And then it will feel simpler to understand. So the other thing that you need to think about is what needs to be understood to convey the big idea. Your paper or your report will take more time than the time that you will have to present your idea. That is maybe in lesser extent true now that your reports are 6 pages, but if you at some point present your bachelor or master's thesis, it will be even more true because you cannot present work that you did on 50 pages, not in detail. You can give the big idea. You want to give your audience the idea, okay, this is what it's about. And if I really want to know more about, then I will look at what that person has written before. And as I already said, if you need time to understand something or you need to look something up, it wasn't completely clear to you, you have a good chance that you need to explain that as well, because otherwise it will hamper understanding while you're giving the talk. So now you have to figure out your audience. You need to think about the motivation. So why should your audience listen? You can of course say, hey, because they're forced to, they have to sit in here. Yes, but that does not mean that they actively listen. So how do you make them want to listen? And one thing is you need to have an idea. So if you present a scientific paper, a thesis, etc., it will take lots of hours to figure out precisely what is the content of that, where you go through every detail and then you know exactly what's apart. you cannot convey all these details in your talk. So what you can help with is catalyze the digestion of the work, kind of give your reader a red your audience a red thread for knowing what they will have to do to understand all the details. So it cannot replace the work that if someone really wants to know all the details, that they will have to read your work. It's just you help them on the way, you give them already the key messages. And of course, you should present the same ideas in the paper. So it shouldn't be a, this was what my report was about, and now my presentation is completely unconnected. No, but this idea should be presented on its own terms. So in nearly all cases, the way that you present a topic in writing and the way that you present it in talking are different things. So you still should give the idea, but with other things to help you. So you should not just copy and paste from your written work, because then we all could have just read your reports and there is no added benefit from actually listening to the presentation. So do not just take certain sentences and just copy them into your presentation. What should you ask yourself? What, if I give my presentation like this, could a listener remember the motivation? So could he or she remember why this problem is interesting, why it's important, and how it connects to the bigger question in that area? Could a listener state the main idea? So the key take-home message is that after you gave the presentation, will people be able to state that? Could a listener summarize the talk in 3 sentences? So could they tell you, this was what it was about, and this is what they did? And if you happen to have a motivated listener, can they recreate the results that you have in your report? Could they recreate them in 3 weeks? And then the maybe quite important question is, would a listener know when to consult the paper? So the idea is that with your presentation, you give your listener an idea what it's about, what is the question, how are we solving it? And if at some point in time they come across a similar problem or exactly this question, then they should remember, hey, I heard this presentation at some point in time. I should look at the paper and see how they solved it. What did they do? What was the exact problem formulation? So that's what they should have in mind after you present it. How about text? So we will have to use text on your slides, but you shouldn't pile them up with text. So use as little text as necessary. It's a bit difficult if you're actually talking about language or about text, then you will have to put a lot of text on there. But in most other cases, you can try for a, 10 minutes presentation. You will have text, but try to use imagery. And you shouldn't use large blocks of text. So as you saw, the way that I'm using it now, I'm having one line after one line appear. Why do I want to do that? If you just show the complete block of text, your listeners will automatically start reading the entire block. And then you talk, but many will not be able to digest both simultaneously. So they will read, and after they read, they come back to try to listen to you, but then you're at some point in that large block and they don't really know where you are and what you already told them. And then you will probably lose them. So try to just insert the text one after another. So introduce some text sentence by sentence, or if you have just a list of words, just those list items. Do not just give the complete text and have your audience deal with the complete text. And one really important part is you should use images. And I will try to make the point with a presentation on a topic that a lot of my research is on, which is called the art gallery problem. And I will try to tell you about the problem just using text, and I will tell you about the problem using images. And then we can try to figure out when you will understand what I'm actually talking about. So the take-home message should be, whenever possible, use images. If you can substitute text by an image, go for it. If you can substitute text by a diagram, go for it. And this course is pretty much an exemption from that. So if you also looked at the slides from Michael, there's lots of language because we're talking about language. If that is not the case, try to use images. So let's have a look at the text-based version of talking about the art gallery problem. A polygon is given by a set of vertices, V1 with Vn, and edges, where you have edge V1, V2, edge V2, V3, and so on until edge Vn minus 1 Vn and Vn V1. Such that no pair of non-consecutive edges share a point. And the polygon P is a closed finite region bounded by the vertices and edges. And now a point P is visible from a point Q if a straight line connection PQ is fully contained in the polygon. And then the art gallery problem asks for the minimum number of point-shaped guards in our polygon P, such that all points of P are visible to some guard. So this is a text-based version of explaining that. So now if I asked you what the problem is about, can anyone tell me what it is about? Probably not, because you kind of have to already know what polygons with vertices, what edges are, and how they connect. But we can try to explain the same things using lots of images. And the idea is that you will understand what it's about anyhow, even if you do not now know what a polygon is. So a point is visible from another if the straight line connection between those two is contained in the polygon. So let's look at 2 points, these two. And the black thing gives us the border of the polygon. So now the straight line connection between those two is contained in the polygon. So it's like both of you sitting in a room and you can look and see the other person, then it's visible. If you look at this point and the blue point, well, they do not see each other because the straight line connection is not fully within the polygon. It's not fully within the room. There are walls in between, so they cannot see each other. How can we think of a polygon? You can kind of think of the ground plan of a room. So in this case, for example, your polygon will look like that. And that's also the motivation of having an art gallery problem. So there, your polygon will be the ground plan, the floor plan of your art gallery. So now we have an idea what polygons are. So what is the art gallery problem? What does guarding mean? So you're given a polygon, for example, the black thing here. And now the question that the art gallery problem is, how many guards do we need to monitor the polygon? So what's a guard? This is a guard, right? That's a person. But this is a massy problem, so we're not thinking about the guard as a person. We think it's point-shaped. So let's just say it's the head that we take into account. And when we place one into the polygon, then we can mark all the points in the polygon that this guard can see. So everything that is in light red now, that is the set of points that are visible to that guard. So if you stand somewhere and there might be corners behind which you cannot look, but the rest you can see. And this is called the visibility polygon. It's the thing that is visible. And in this case, we can just place another one. And those two together will completely see every point of the polygon. So in this case, the answer is 2. To guard this polygon, we need 2 guards. And this explains the same thing that I did with the slide before, where I just talked about the same problem, but using only text. And hopefully you understood way more about the problem in the second version, where I talked with images. It's just easier to understand. If you just have text, it's kind of, you have to understand it, you have to have your images in your head. Maybe you can have them, maybe you're not fast enough to follow and drawing your own polygons and so on in your head. And also, if you do not beforehand know what a polygon is, then it's really hard to think of a polygon unless someone shows you one. So if you somehow can use images, do that. You will help your audience to understand things faster. And because a presentation has a really limited time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you need to get a message across, you don't want to lose your listener. And if you use images, you have a better chance that you will not do that. So whenever you can, use images. One important part, if you use images that you didn't do yourself, so you use a picture, you'd use a figure that someone else drew, you need to give the source. It's the same as in the report. If you take someone else's work into account, you need to say, hey, this is not what I did. Someone else did the work, and we really should pay them respect for having done this work. So whenever you use an image, you use anything that you haven't done yourself, you need to give the source. Okay, what are other things that we could think about when we want to give a presentation? One other thing is style. So how about transition and visuals? So if you think about the slides that I had so far, I did not have one slide kind of flying in or anything like that, or text flying in with some noise coming in. And you don't want to use them, these fancy transitions, just because they exist. Of course, it's kind of fun if you do that the first time. It's like, oh, something's flying in, wonderful. You're not getting across a really serious picture of what you want to present. And that's what you want to do in a presentation. If with a transition you can enable understanding something because this will fit exactly in the thing that you talk about, then you can use it. But do not just use them because they exist, use them because you have a reason for using them in this point. Do not use sound effects, not at all. So there's pretty much no good reason to ever use sound effects if you want to give a scientific presentation. You should have a polished style. So think about how your slides should look like. The style should be the same throughout your slides. It should help your reader to understand something. So if you don't happen to talk about flowers, there shouldn't be flower decorations in the upper part of your slides. Make it clean and make it polished. So you should have the same font. You should have the same kind of structure that repeats itself. All that will help your audience. And it will also give the audience the impression, okay, this person put the time into the slides, and now I can actually concentrate on the content. If you have like lots of irritating things on your slides, then your audience might concentrate on these and not on the thing that you actually want to talk about, which is not what you want. So polish the style. What does it mean? You should think about the choice of font. Make it a clear one. Make it not one that has lots of embellishments. Don't have any visual adornments, as I said. Unless you really, really want to talk about flowers, there shouldn't be any wonderful flowers in there. Balance the white space. So try to have the text blocks in the center. If you have text and image, try to balance them out. So don't have text and image on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of your slide is completely white. Try to balance it. It's just nicer to look at. If you can have intuition guiding animations, if there's something you can come up with, do that. It will take some time, but it will help and it will look really nice. So that's something that also falls under the polished style of your slides. And with that, we come to a topic that's not about how your presentation will look like or how your slides will look like, anything formal, but we talk about nerves, which is that many of you will feel insecure before giving that talk. And that's absolutely normal to have that. I used to have that as well. What helps is lots and lots of teaching in front of many people. So I had classes with 250, 300 students every week, and that helps. So the idea is you will have the nerves. Most of your colleagues will have them too. One thing that will help you is that you will not give the presentation on your own. You are in a group, so you can kind of cling to each other, help each other, and hopefully be not as insecure about that. So what can we think about when we talk right now? So fear of public speaking is common. Many people have that. And with extensive experience, you can eliminate this fear, but that will take time. And until that happens, you will somehow have to learn to exploit your fear. So why are we afraid? Because there's a fear of embarrassment, right? You're standing exposed in front of people, or in this case, everyone else has a black rectangle and you're talking. And there's a natural fear that you might get embarrassed by something. And then your body misinterprets that as an existential crisis, and it will release adrenaline. And some of that is good, but at some point that will be too much and you will just be chattering and you will have a problem to actually articulate yourself. So how could you try to regulate that? If you know that you will be afraid, that you will have nerves, try to regulate your adrenaline. One tip could be that you do lots of sports before you give the presentation. So your body is kind of, it has to put all the adrenaline already into sports, and then it will not use as much when you have to actually give the presentation. And if still kind of directly before you giving the talk, you feel, oops, my heart starts to race, I'm getting really, really excited, I might have a problem talking now, take a really deep breath, hold it as long as you can, and then exhale slowly. And take another and do that a few times, and hopefully your heart will slow down. So the message is, it's normal. Many of you will have that fear, and it hopefully will disappear over time. At least if you really do it often, give presentations, then it will disappear, but it will not disappear by just giving one presentation. So you'll just have to get through the process of getting used to it. And for me, it was simply with each talk. So if you talk again and again, and maybe weekly, you will have less pre-talk nerves. So in the beginning, teaching in front of so many students was really, really, something I didn't feel comfortable with, but you will feel comfortable at some point in time. So at some point you will feel, oops, I'm not nervous anymore. So I don't really care. You can ask me to give a talk, I don't know, tonight, and I'll be happy to do that. And you will get there at some point if you continue giving presentations. And the fear simply disappears. And I used to be really shy, like when I was starting to study. So it will go away. What else should we talk about? Well, I have a slide that's called miscellaneous. So what will come in there? If you can open with a short, clean, original, and relevant humor, do that. So if you have something that really fits the topic, absolutely go ahead. Do not make a joke just for the sake of a joke. But if you want to have one, test it on a practice audience. It's not super fun to start your presentation with something where you intended people to laugh, and that in some way doesn't really work that way. To go back on the topic that we talked about before, if you happen to have nerves, that will not help you at all. And one thing that will help you to improve that, and that will be relatively easy now because we can do it directly in here, video record your talks and watch them. That is kind of painful because you will see how many fill words you're using. So whenever you use and some things like that, and you will see how much of the time you're just looking down on your notes and you're not actually interacting with the audience. But it will help you. You will be able to identify, so this is how I look. I really like the presentation of X. How did X do that? This is how I am doing it. Yeah, I should look into some of the things that that other person was doing and try to adapt to that. We already talked about style and choosing your font. One of these recommendations is never use Comic Sans in a technical talk. So there are Comic Sans brackets, and there are quite a few of them. So try to avoid that thing. Use a clear font, one that is not embellished. Gesture with your whole body, and that is more difficult now. So you can, as I try to do sometimes, you can use your hands if you raise them high enough. But it's in this situation, you have to even think about it more. So how can you try to emphasize what you're saying with your body, even if only a small part of you will be visible? this is what you can pretty much forget for now, but if you give presentations again in a non-online environment, step away from the podium. So use one of these clickers and step away so that you are standing free and that you can actually interact with your audience more and not just kind of hide behind the podium or the table where your computer is standing and do not, and kind of, yeah, I don't want to talk to anyone, but I'm going to give my presentation. And as I said, use a remote, one of these clickers. And one thing that can help you to improve is, you can do that with video recording, but also in general, pay attention to what you like and don't like in other presentations. Make a mental note of that and observe yourself while you're giving a presentation. Am I also doing that? Am I not doing that? Wonderful, I'm not doing that. But if it's something you like and you're not doing it, you might try to integrate that. And then finally, something that's not going to be the topic here either, but if you happen to have code or math formulas, you need to use them sparingly. Even if you talk about a math paper, you should not just have math formulas. Again, you should give the intuition of what you're doing, of what the problem is, how it's being solved. If you can use images again, wonderful. Try to express the things in some other way and not lots of code and math formulas, because again, you will lose certain people. They will try to understand what you've been written and you've written there and try to, okay, what's the variable name and what is that index meaning? And you will again lose them for actually listening to you, which you do not want to do. So those were all the things that were valid for all presentations. And now we'll talk a bit about online presentations, and also I want you to think about what you feel unsure about, what we should maybe discuss, so that you feel, yeah, I know also how to give these online presentations. So there's something that are still valid. You need to still communicate your ideas clearly. You still should enable your audience to take away the key message. And what is even more important here is you should use a clean and simple background with high contrast, so that everyone on whichever screen they are watching that easily can read everything. Why is it more important here? Well, if you give a presentation in class, then you have the projector and you can check the quality, right? You see that. You know exactly in what quality you will present it. So you can go in there before, 2 days before, check the projected quality and see, okay, there is not enough contrast between text and background. You can do that. Here, it will depend a bit on what screens your colleagues are using. So try to use a simple background, high contrast, so that everyone can read what you're writing. And then there's one thing that I haven't talked about before, but that is still valid. If you want to make notes, do not copy complete sentences from the paper, or do not write complete sentences. The problem with writing complete sentences or even paragraphs is you're saying something, and then you look down and okay, now I wanted to say something. Where in this paragraph am I? Read through it, and then here I am, and then you can continue talking. And that will not help you to have a continuous talking experience. Use only keywords, so the main points or the things that you think you might forget, or certain formulations that you are unsure about when you're talking in English. Use these kind of keywords. And always have in the back of your mind, you might forget talking about something, but that's actually not the end of the word, because most likely it's only you or your group members who know that you forgot about it. Everyone else is not that much in the topic than you are. So it's okay if you forget something. It's better to forget something instead of just looking down at your notes all the time and thinking, okay, I really shouldn't forget these things. So if you have notes, and it's fine to have your notes, but try to use keywords only so that they can help you by just briefly looking down at them to get you back on track, but so that they do not disrupt your actual presentation. But there are also things that are different. You have little or no interaction with your audience. So if you look at how I'm talking now, I'm essentially talking to myself, because all of you are black square rectangles and I can talk to me. So you do not get any feedback. You don't get people saying like this, or or people just having really large eyes and kind of telling you, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. So you need to kind of think about what are the things that I need to tell people, so that they understand it without actually seeing the reaction. So this is a bit more difficult. And what you will get is, so when you have the student presentations, definitely your group members will all show the camera, and I will show my camera, and possibly some of your colleagues will, but you might also just interact with black squares, and that's more difficult. So a presentation is there to help the audience get the message of what you want to say, but now you cannot check if this audience actually received your message. So there you have to think a bit more how you can communicate. And also an online audience has potentially a shorter attention span. You do not have, as I said, this direct interaction, which makes it easier to have attention on something. And also you're sitting at home and there's lots of stuff around you that can also get your attention, and then you're no longer paying attention to the presentation. So have that in mind. How can you get people to still listen and watch what you're doing? You could possibly use handouts. So what do I mean with that? It might be that you're have your slides, and normally if you would give the presentations in class, you maybe would do a small drawing on the whiteboard, or you would a sketch or something like that. And of course, what you can do here, you can connect a tablet or a phone, and if it's connected to your computer, then you can, instead of sharing your slides, you can decide to share that screen and you can draw something there, but that is either or. So you can either share your slides or you can share another screen. So it's not something that supplements what you have on your slides. If you need that, if there's anything you think, people should have that beforehand, it's a good idea to have 1 or 2 pages where you have that drawing on, have it as a PDF and send it around to everyone before you give the talk. And then you can say, hey, and now that we're talking about that, take this sketch into account. Of course, you can also just put it on the slides, but maybe it's just an additional explanation or something. So if you want to have that, it's fine to have handouts that you most of the time will not have if you give a presentation in person. And here it's even more important to not just read the text from the slides or report, because then there's really no added value. So if you are just standing there and either reading the report or you're reading just everything that's on there, why would I even listen then, right? So why would I try to come in? Why would I want to be there? So you need to give some added value. You need to describe things, you need to explain things that you have not on your side. You need to, and it can just be that you give a longer explanation, that you give some background, that you formulate it with other words, but there should be some added value to just reading your slides. And you should talk directly to the camera. So try to not do it like that and talk like that, because then at some point it's going to be really boring. So try to look up. That might not mean that you're actually talking to the people, but you still give them the feeling that you're actually talking to them. So try to do that. What else is different there? There are technical differences. So you can use whatever you want, essentially. It could be PDF slides, could be Keynote, could be PowerPoint. But you should schedule a meeting with just your group members and test sharing them so that you know how that works. How do I share my screen? How do I pick out what exactly they should see? Test that so that you, in the presentation, really know what you're doing there. That's the same as in a normal presentation, to go into the presentation in 1 or 2 days beforehand and check that you can connect your computer to the projector. The image, as I said, has a good contrast and all these things. So that's kind of the same thing. Now you're just testing it online before. Another thing is that, so there is not just that you have less interaction with your audience, you also have less, in particular, less nonverbal communication with your group members. So it's not like you said something and then you can look to the side and say, hey, you continue, it's you now. You cannot do that. So you need to really communicate beforehand who will present what part, what will be the clue for the next person taking over, how do I make sure that I have that kind of a script for that, who will do what. You don't have to have the complete, so don't write a script, everyone learning what you want to say, but there should be some kind of hint that tells you, hey, that person is done now, now it's my turn. And there's this other thing, if you give a presentation in a room, you can just pass on the computer and the next person can click on it, or you can pass a remote along. This will not be possible here either. There's one of each group that will share his or her screen. So the others are not able to say, okay, now please do that again. So discuss somehow beforehand how you should switch them. You can just say, you always, I don't know, do it like that, and every time you do it like that, the person that's actually sharing your slides will click. Try to have some communication for that enables you to, not every time that you have one sentence in there, next, that's going to be interruptive for your audience. So that's the general idea of the things that will be different. So as I said, there are certain things, I mean, the most general concepts are still the same. There are just technical differences, and there's this problem that you have less interaction with both your audience and your fellow group members. So you need to take that into account. So that were the things that I came up for online presentations. Are there any other things that you thought about, that you have questions about, something that you think is really different now, something you're unsure how to do? Okay, if you don't have any questions now, I mean, we still have, we have the group meetings, so you can ask it there. We also still have a lecture on May 12th. And as I said, you can just send an email. If it's a general question, it's a good idea to send it to the mailing list so that everyone will get the answer. If it's a general question, I might, even if you don't send it to the mailing list, I might send the answer to the mailing list so that everyone is aware of what I answered, so that I don't send the same answer, I don't know, 5 or 10 times. If it's something that's specific to your topic, just write an email either to Nisha or me, and either we'll answer or we'll schedule a meeting if we think that's necessary to discuss in a bit more detail. And that's actually more or less already what I have. Just one final thing. You shouldn't just finish with a thank you slide. Why? Because the thank you slide is the slide that will probably be there for the longest time. It will be there while people ask questions, while your opponents ask questions. So they will your audience will all the time look at this thank you slide. If the thank you slide just has thank you or something like questions or any like these things, that is something that does not tell us anything about your talk. It's generic. It could be the last slide of anyone's talk. So what you want to do with your last slide, you want to remind your audience of a key message of your talk. So one way to do that, for example, for me would be this. So it's still thank you, but what I want to show you is, hey, you really should use images. And now, even if you ask for the next 5 minutes about whatever from the talk, unless I have to get back to a specific slide, you will have this slide in front of you, and then the key take-home message of your presentation will stick even more to your audience than if you just have this generic thank you slide or question slide, which doesn't tell us anything about what you just talked about. So try to use your last slide to remind your audience, what did you talk about? What was the really important thing that I wanted you to know? And that is my last slide. So we will be done relatively early today, but before I really close, are there any questions? So are there questions on generally given presentations? Are there questions on giving them online? Is there anything still unclear that you think we should discuss about giving presentations? Is there anything unclear about technical questions? So just to say that there is this If you look at your menu bar there's a microphone, which you can mute or not. There's a video, where you can stop the video or not, and also choose the background and so on. Then you have the participants, or I at least have them because I'm the host of this meeting, so I can also mute or unmute you. Then you have polling. You can prepare pollings, but that would mean that you will have to invite them, so that is an option you cannot use. And then they have this square with an arrow, and this is where you share. And then if you click on that, so do try that in a meeting with just each other at some point, you can choose what you want to share. You can choose to share your complete screen, or you can choose to share just specific slides or specific programs. Or, as I said, if you have a mobile or a tablet connected, you can also choose to share the screen of that device. So that one you will use, and then if you go into presentation mode, that will also be the presentation mode for everyone else. And then there is something like chat and so on. One thing that I'll encourage you to do there a bit more is, so definitely the opposition will have to ask the questions orally. So do not just write them. So you'll have to interact with the people giving the presentation. And it would be nice if anyone else has a question to ask them as well. Why? Again, it will give you a bit more interaction. It will give you feedback on your presentation. So I will give feedback if it's one of the topics of Nisha will also give feedback. But if you have any questions or anything that you realize that they could do differently or that you didn't understand, just take your notes and also ask or give the remarks afterwards. And I know that it's difficult in the beginning, that in this environment it feels harder to say something at all. But you'll still have time to get used to it. So your presentations are only in the end of May, by which time you probably had that many of these lectures that you hopefully feel quite comfortable in just speaking up in this kind of environment. So before I close, any kind of questions, anything you want to ask about abstract, about the presentations?
I have a small question.
Yep.
Regarding the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be in front of the entire class or in smaller groups? You might have given this information already. But
I have not said that, but the presentations are mandatory for everyone, so everyone will be present at all presentations. The idea is that you all, you have these small cycles through which you kind of go, so that you get to learn about 4 topics, but I want you to have at least a basic idea of all the topics to learn something about them. So you listen to all the presentations, and it also has the added value that you can observe a few more people doing presentations and kind of figure out what are things that I also would want to do, what are things that I really don't want to do. So it should help you on both levels, on the content level and also on the technical giving presentations level.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? No? Okay, then I'm going to, if I find my mouse, I'm going to stop sharing. No, nothing is happening. Okay, now you're still here. Okay, if that's that with questions, then we're done relatively early. And we'll see each other Friday next week.